welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Theory Podcast. Bring it in for the real thing. Today, we're going to be talking about the 2020 running back rookie class. We're probably going to do 3 episodes on the 2020 rookies. I figure we'll do the running backs in this episode, the wide receivers on Tuesday, and then next Thursday's episode, we'll do a combined quarterback and tight end episodes because there's just not as many worthwhile people to talk about at those 2 positions as there are at running back and wide receiver. Not a lot of news to talk about in the NFL, but you always love a good office drop, so let's get that in here real quick.
So what do you guys hear? What's the scuttlebutt?
Really nothing. Joe Burrow's on track to be a full go for week 1, recovering from his ACL tear. Courtland Sutton is on track to be ready for week 1. You never love to hear on track. You love to hear that people are ready to go, but on track is just, I don't know, it doesn't boost your confidence more than if they didn't say anything at all, because if you don't hear that they're not on track, you assume that they are on track. So for them to come out and say that they're on track, it's just like, I don't know, it doesn't move the needle in a positive direction. It doesn't really move it in a negative direction, but still, it's one of those things that's like, okay, great. So that's really it for the impactful news right now. I will tell you that, what is today? I'm recording on the 19th. And this Saturday is our rookie draft for my Dynasty League, and I am very much looking forward to it, trying to still make a couple of last-minute moves, get a couple of extra picks, maybe move back in the first round depending on who's going to be there, because I don't know, man. Like, right now, I've got the 106. I expect to have to choose between Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle with that pick, and I want to go Devonta Smith, but that team's already got Jalen Reagor and Dallas Goedert on it, and it's like, good Lord, how many Eagles can you have? You know, it's not that good of an offense to be stacking it up like that. It's not best ball, you know. Good Lord, so it makes taking Devonta Smith a little bit harder. So I don't know. We'll see how it shakes out with the first 5 picks, and see if maybe moving back is in my best interest, and give somebody else the Slim Reaper, as I believe Ray Garvin from the Fantasy Pros Dynasty podcast coined him, the Slim Reaper. I like that a lot. So look forward to, on Tuesday's episode, I'm certain that we'll start with a recap of that draft here, just to let you guys know how that went. Though a handful of people who listen to the show will probably be in attendance for that, so it won't be so much of a surprise for the people who are listening, who are there part of that league. Let's go ahead and we'll get into it. What I did was, speaking of my Dynasty League, I just took the order in which running backs were drafted in our league, and I'm going to kind of go through them in that order. James Robinson, as I'm sure was the case in almost every other Dynasty rookie draft, was undrafted, so we're going to start with him rather than leave him for the end, where we're just, we go through all the top names and then a bunch of the chaff, and then tag James Robinson on the end there. We'll start with James Robinson, and then we'll go in order from there. So, undrafted superstar, really. I mean, he goes undrafted. You pick him up off the waiver wire, and he blew expectations out of the water. There's no really other way to say it. He was so much better than he had any right to be. Once Jacksonville got rid of Leonard Fournette, the scramble began for who's going to be the new lead back. I mean, there was like Divine Ozigbo and Dare Ogunbowale. Was he on that team? Raquel Armstead is just a who's who of people who are not it in the NFL. And lo and behold, it wasn't somebody who was already on the team, but undrafted free agent James Robinson who thrust himself into that role. And like I said, man, he delivered on it. Were you able to get him in Dynasty and redraft? I mean, it likely catapulted you into the playoffs. He was so consistently getting the workload. He had 10 of the 14 games that he played, he had 16 or more carries, and so consistently good with it. Again, 10 of the 14 games that he played, he had 10 or more points in standard scoring. He finished the season with more than 1,400 total yards and 10 touchdowns. This is an undrafted free agent, man. 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns is ridiculous. Like I said, he finished as the running back 7, even missing 2 games. And even after all of that, even after such a crazy rookie year, proving himself every week, being so consistent, being so good, even after all of that, his draft capital as an undrafted free agent made everybody nervous about whether that success was enough to keep him in this role in 2021. free agency comes and we're all waiting to see who's going to come in. Are they going to bring somebody in? Is somebody going to compete with him? Is it going to be a timeshare? Is nobody coming? Is he going to be a monster again? They add Carlos Hyde, and everybody just sigh of relief, But then the draft came, and it just shocked us all.
The Jacksonville Jaguars select Travis Etienne.
What the f***? The Jaguars needed so much help in so many other places. I talked about this already in the draft episode that I just boggled my mind, but we'll go over it just a little bit more here because I got more to get off my chest. They needed so much more help every other place. That running back, I mean, it had to be, if not the very bottom, like the second to last thing on their list as far as needs. But this is our reality now. So where is James Robinson now? At the moment, he's in a battle that I think he's likely to lose on draft capital alone to Travis Etienne. Robinson will still be involved, and he'll still be good, but that running back one ceiling, it's evaporated. It's completely gone. Etienne is almost certainly the better pass catcher. Hell, he's been working with the receivers so far in rookie minicamp, so what does that tell you? Robinson is probably an RB3 this year, someone you want on your bench in case Etienne misses time, somebody who you can start in good matchups. Or if the preseason leads us to believe that his role will be larger than the one that we think he has at present, he may move up. It's too bad that his stock took such a massive hit after such an impressive debut. But you have to at least be happy with the first year you got out of him, given what the price tag was for you. So for what you paid, I think you got more than you probably assumed you were going to get out of his lifespan. So you have to be happy with the first year, but if you managed to get him, I'm sure you thought that you were going to have a high-end running back for a few years, and it's just gone immediately. It's unfortunate, it really is. So in our draft, the 101 was Clyde EdwardsHelaire. And following the 2020 NFL draft, CEH, he shot to the head of the class with the first-round pick by the Chiefs. He was the number 5 running back before the draft. And that draft stock, like I said, it just put him at number 1 with a bullet. He made everyone who took him feel incredible in week 1 there. 138 yards, a rushing touchdown in his week 1 debut. But from there, he played more like that running back 5 that he was ranked as before the draft. Through 6 weeks before they brought in Le'Veon Bell, he was good. 4 games with 16-plus carries and 3 games with 10 or more standard points. Then they bring in Bell, and in his 7 games after that, he got 16 or more carries 1 time, including games of 8, 6, and 5 in consecutive weeks. 8, 6, and 5 carries in consecutive weeks, and only 2 games over 10 standard points. You have got to be extremely disappointed in the finish to the fantasy season, and he's not someone who carried you into the playoffs if you made it despite him. He certainly didn't deliver for you like you would expect for a player you invested the capital you had to have him on your roster, failing to hit 100 yards or score in either week 14 or 15, and missing week 16 entirely. In the NFL playoffs, he got eased back in against the Bills with 6 carries for a massive 7 yards, including a 1-yard touchdown. In the Super Bowl, he had a good statistical game on only 11 touches, but the Chiefs got kind of massacred, so he wasn't part of the catch-up game plan, which is alarming given his pass-catching pedigree in college. The fact that he only had 3 targets in a game where Mahomes threw 49 times and was under pressure immediately so often, it's like I said, it's alarming. The Chiefs have a new offensive line this year, which on one hand should be better than what they put on the field at the end of last year, but at the same time, it's new. It's a unit that's going to have some growing pains as they all learn how to work together and start to gel. He's currently going at the 401 as the running back 21, which is a precipitous drop for someone who had the largest of hype trains this time a year ago. Our 102 was Jonathan Taylor, taken by yours truly. Thank you very much. Taylor started well with 67 receiving yards in the first game, but that receiving role was usurped by Nyheim Hines fairly quickly and never really materialized again the rest of the year as he got to 40 or more receiving yards only 2 more times on the entire year. Then Marlon Mack goes down in week 1. Oh, buddy, here we go. Take the chains off, unleash JT on the world, and in week 2 they did that with 26 carries, but he only averaged an underwhelming 3.9 yards per carry with those carries. From there, he hit 16 or more carries only once until week 11. and 10 or more standard points 4 times in his first 10 weeks, including a 3-game stretch of 3.1, 7.4, and 3.7 points, where his yards per carry where he had a yards per carry of 2.0 or worse twice in that stretch.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Oh, man. This is not what we signed up for. What a nightmare. JT was being indecisive, not hitting holes like he should, and generally seemed like he wasn't processing the game at the speed required for the NFL. Maybe he hadn't adjusted from college, where maybe you can be a little bit slower to kind of read things and find the hole that you're supposed to go to. But in the NFL, man, you got to be quick, fast, and in a hurry on top of stuff, man. So once we hit week 11, though, in his final 6 games, Taylor had 16 or more carries 5 of those 6 games and 10 or more standard points in all 6 of those games. He scored 7 times in those games. His worst yards per carry was 4.1, but he had 4 games with 5.2 yards per carry or better. He even had a game against the admittedly putrid Jaguars where he rushed for 253 yards. In his one postseason game, he again had 16 or more carries, and he would have had 10-plus fantasy points with 78 yards and another touchdown. So, who's Jonathan Taylor in 2021? My short answer is...
I must confess that I feel like a monster. I feel like a monster.
He's a monster. I don't think them bringing back Marlon Mack is a roadblock for Taylor, the same way that we all saw it last year at this time. He only got 39 targets with a man who is known for his propensity for passing to running backs in Phillip Rivers. So you would have to think that his catches will probably come down. But I think that he showed that he was good enough in the passing game. And a little reason for optimism is Miles Sanders had almost 5 targets per game with Carson Wentz in 8 games in Philly. If Jonathan Taylor gets to 50 targets next year in 17 games, I think he has every chance to finish as a top 5 running back again this year. Then in our league, the 3 and the 4 were 2 receivers, Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb. So the 105 was J.K. Dobbins. Dobbins had the least carries of anyone we've talked about yet, with only 134. Yet he led the league in yards per carry with 6.01. That was the highest mark of anybody with at least 60 carries in the last 3 years. So he was crazy efficient with what he got, but he just didn't get much. In 15 games, he got to 16 or more carries exactly 0 times. He got to 10 or more points 8 out of 15 games, which means that he was sort of hit or miss. If you look at it through a different lens, though, you can be a little bit more optimistic. So after their Week 7 bye, Mark Ingram had just 22 total carries. He got kind of phased out. He was a healthy scratch a handful of games, so he got marginalized well and truly. And Dobbins started to take off. Of his 8 10-plus standard point games, 7 of them came in the 9 games after the bye. So throwing a lot of numbers at you now, but remember, he had 8 games of 10 or more points out of the 15 total that he played. 7 of those came in the last 9 games after the bye. Now, Lamar Jackson is going to run more than any quarterback in the league, once again, which means that JK is just not going to get the carries that you really want in a superstar running back, and with only 24 targets last year, he's not going to make up for that through the air. Also factor in that they signed Sammy Watkins, they drafted Rashad Bateman and Tylan Wallace, and you have to assume they'll be throwing a little bit more. And given that they threw only 406 times last year, they can't really throw any less, so it's kind of by default that they'll probably throw more this year. So let's say that Dobbins gets a 35% carry share, which is more than any Ravens running back has had in the last 3 years. So just looking at their last 3 years, in 2019, Mark Ingram had 34, rounding up. He had 34% of the carries. In 2020 and 2018, Lamar Jackson led the team in rush attempts at 29% in 2020 and 27% in 2018. The lead running back each of those years was Gus Edwards, who had about 25% of the carries. So given that, I think that it's a little optimistic to project 35% for J.K. Dobbins, but let's run through this. If he gets that kind of workload, he probably sees close to 200 carries. If his efficiency drops a little bit, as it almost certainly will, like I said, 6.01 is league leading for the last 3 years, so it's going to come down. So if he gets 200 carries, and I mean, even if he stays at 5 yards per carry, which would be very, very, very good, He'll probably just barely hit 1,000 yards. He'll probably actually fall short of 1,000 yards if he gets 200 carries, which means that his running back 16 ADP is maybe a touch high. I just don't think he's got that same sort of upside that other people in that range do. Next, we move to the 106, which was Cam Akers. Listen, yesterday I won my first item on Pristine Auction. You've no doubt heard all about them if you listen to the Fantasy Footballers at all. And I don't know. I started watching Cam Akers highlights on YouTube, like the game against Seattle in the playoffs and the game against the Patriots in week 14. And just he passed that eyeball test for me, man. And he looks so good that I was like, you want to know what? I'm getting on Pristine Auction. I'm going to see if I can win me a signed Cam Akers jersey. Sure enough, did. So that being the case, we all know that I'm about to be fairly positive about Cam Akers. So Cam started off in a three-way timeshare with Darrell Henderson and Malcolm Brown. He also missed 4 of his first 8 games. After the bye, he still was not leading the way in this backfield. Through week 12, he had 16 or more carries 0 times and 10 or more points only once.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
I mean, man, oh man, getting off to slow starts. We're looking at a real bust here through 12 weeks. But in week 12, he broke off a 61-yard run. He finished with 84 yards and a touchdown on 9 carries, which appears to have turned some heads on the Rams coaching staff, because from there, including the postseason, his last 6 games, he had 16 or more carries 5 of those games. The other time he had 15 carries, so just barely missing our arbitrary threshold, and 10 or more points in 4 of those games. So Akers missed week 16 after suffering what was called a high ankle sprain, and in his absence, Darrell Henderson had 12 carries for 62 yards. Very nice game, you know. Akers came back the next week. From a high ankle sprain to miss only 1 week is ridiculous, so that was probably not exactly what it was, or he came back far too soon, maybe a little bit of both. When he came back in week 16, he was just immediately the lead back again. Darrell Henderson's week 16 performance, be damned, get out of here. Cam Akers is the guy. 21 carries, though he was clearly still hobbled by whatever ankle injury he did have, as he got just 34 yards. But he did add 52 through the air, so still a decent game. He did also lose a fumble, that jerk, but that's fine. I believe with no reservations that Cam Akers is the guy for the Rams this year, and Henderson is his backup. Cam passed the eye test, like I said, for me when I was watching some of his video, and apparently for a lot of other people, given his running back 12 ADP, according to Fantasy Football Calculator, I think Akers has legit top 5 upside in 2021. And with the upgraded quarterback, you have to imagine that he's going to have a little bit easier road to hoe there. He had a stacked front 35.9% of the time, which was number 8 for running backs last year, according to Player Profiler. And with Stafford, defenses won't be able to load up in that same way at that same rate next year. So you have to imagine things are going to get a little bit easier for him. He's going to be the lead back there. I think Cam Akers is going to explode this year. Next was the 107, where DeAndre Swift was taken. Swift was a pass-catching back we thought that he would be coming into the league. 57 targets, 357 yards, with only 114 carries in 2020. You won't be surprised to hear that Swift got 16 or more carries one time. And it was 16 exactly in the 13 games that he played. So very, very excellent through the air, just kind of what we expected, but on the ground just was not getting the opportunity there in the 13 games he played. Despite not getting the opportunity on the ground, he had 10 or more standard points in 7 of those 13 games that he played. The sour news for Swift is with the changes that the Lions have gone through this offseason. The offense is likely to be much, much worse than it was last year, and the Vegas odds have Detroit favored to lose every game this year, which is very impressive. Them and the Texans, I believe, are the other team that's supposed to lose every game this year. On the plus side, though, the upgrade on the offensive line with Penny Sewell should be helpful. Like I said, they're according to PFF, they were the number 7 offensive line in football last year. You think that probably stays close to the same, maybe goes up a little bit with Sewell. So that's certainly good news for him. And we've seen Goff support a running back with a lot of targets before. I mean, Todd Gurley was a monster with Jared Goff, so I don't know why we couldn't do that with DeAndre Swift. Certainly not on the ground to the same level, but Todd Gurley had back-to-back seasons with 80 or more targets, so DeAndre Swift certainly not going to be cut off at the knees by Jared Goff. With the weapons around him in Detroit, I think Swift may be pretty heavily targeted this year. Running back 20 ADP bakes in the idea that he could flounder on an awful team while still having the upside of someone like an Austin Eckler type, where he's doing more work through the air than he is on the ground, but getting a little bit of that groundwork as well. So could see something like that. So the running back 20 is kind of teeters on both of those edges. As we get through the preseason, it may shift one way or another. He may fall a little bit. He may rise a little bit. But we'll see as we get closer to the actual start of the season. And I'd be fine having Swift at the end of the third round as my running back 2. Or, I mean, if you start with 2 running backs at the end of the first and the second swing and then get DeAndre Swift at the end of the third, I mean, I would be very, very happy with that. Maybe a little bit off ADP, but the next running back that was taken in our league was the 112, and that was Zach Moss. And my God, the Bills' backfield is a real bummer. Moss broke an insane amount of tackles in college. He was PFF's most elusive back in the 2020 class. He was their number 2 rated running back in that class. But, I mean, that just did not translate in his NFL debut. He was fairly uninspiring in what is just a really bad spot for running backs, it has to be said. So his outlook is not very high. He's going at the end of the 9th round right now, about a round and a half behind his teammate Devin Singletary. To give you the 16-10 metrics that we've been working with for other backs, Moss had 16 or more carries 0 times in 13 games and had 10 or more fantasy points in 3 of the 13 games that he played. Just like J.K. Dobbins, he's not going to make up for that lack of opportunity and production at all through the air. The cherry on top of this poop Sunday is that Josh Allen vultures goal line touchdowns at an insane pace. So, I mean, all avenues to fantasy success are all but closed to Zach Moss. There's just no clear path for him to be somebody that you really want on your team. And the ADP of the 9th round kind of tells you that all you need to know. Just after him at the 201 went Keyshawn Vaughn. Vaughn didn't get on the field to any real degree last year, so there's really not a lot to say about him. The signing of Leonard Fournette pretty much sealed his fate last year. Bruce Arians in the offseason did say that Vaughn was in line for a breakout this year, but they brought back Leonard Fournette. They signed Giovanni Bernard. They still have Ronald Jones, so I'm just going to call Bruce Arians a liar. That's not going to happen this year. Maybe in a few years, Vaughn will get a real shot, but he's just a non-factor in Tampa right now. Next was A.J. Dillon. He went at the 206 in our draft. There was a period during free agency when we thought A.J. Dillon could take over the running back 1 spot in Green Bay with Aaron Jones going to the Dolphins or wherever he was going. He was certainly out of town, which now we're hearing about Aaron Rodgers being on the way out. Oh, don't do this to me. Don't trick me like this. Anyway, A.J. Dillon. Jones got a shiny new contract and a great big bag of money, and A.J. Dillon is going to stay relegated to a timeshare or backup role. In 2020, he got 16 or more carries 1 time and 10 or more points 1 time, and those were both the same game, where he got 21 carries and scored 24.9 fantasy points. With Jamal Williams in Detroit now, Dillon may have a little bit more opportunity, but he doesn't participate in the passing game, so he's not going to take over the role that Jamal Williams left behind. Still, he's somehow going ahead of both Bills backs, and it makes total sense. Don't count on A.J. Dillon as anything but a high-end handcuff to Aaron Jones. Maybe a flex, but definitely he's a high-end handcuff at the very least. And then at the 210 goes Antonio Gibson, the next running back off the board, to our resident Washington football team fan who will just blindly take Washington football team players, which has worked out very, very well in recent years with Terry McLaurin and Antonio Gibson both joining his team. So you hate to see it. He's in my division, and I certainly hate to see it. But for Antonio Gibson, a man who had, listen to me now, 33 carries in college. 33 carries in his college career. Antonio Gibson showed out in Washington, man. Most impressively, he had 11 touchdowns. He had 44 targets and a 4.68 yard per carry for the year. I mean, just absolutely fantastic. Now, he had 16 or more carries only 4 times in 14 games, but 10 or more fantasy points in 7 of 14 games. So I think with what he showed you have to expect that his total carries will go up, and maybe J.D. McKissic won't steal so many of the backfield targets. Maybe he goes up in that regard as well. And if this defense is as good as we expect, there could be plenty of time for him to kind of run the clock out at the end of games. The top of the second round is probably a little too much for me. That's where he's going right now. In ADP is pick 15, it looks like, so the 203. I don't know. I kind of like some of the people that are going around that range a little bit better than him. I don't know why I continue to doubt him, though. He's probably going to be absolutely fine there. So if you do believe in Gibson and you do want to take him there, I do expect that you'll probably be fairly happy with that investment at the end of the year. And maybe I'll come around and start taking him in that area by the time I get to drafting. He's excellent, man. He just is. We go a couple of picks later to the third round. The 302, Derrick Evans was taken. Another player who we just didn't get to see in their rookie season, sitting behind the apparently indestructible Derrick Henry, who gets 75,000 carries a game and is just impervious to damage. Somebody with that workload historically should have probably died on the field at this point, but Derrick Henry, he doesn't care. He just keeps going. He's a machine. I think he should be tested for do the Terminator arm test. More of a visual gag than a verbal one, but maybe you know what I'm talking about, where he cuts his arm off. We're getting off track here. Derrick Henry, he doesn't go down. So Derrick Evans, his shot is certainly limited. If Derrick Henry misses any games, Evans will be a hot waiver wire pickup, but outside of that, he's just not worth investing in, I don't think. Then Joshua Kelley went at the 304 for us. I believe that in 2020, Joshua Kelley kind of played himself into the third spot on that depth chart behind Austin Eckler and Justin Jackson. In the 6 games in the middle of the year that Austin Eckler missed, Joshua Kelley was extra bad with 5 games with a yards per carry of 3.1 or less, including a truly impressive negative half a yard per carry on 4 carries against the freaking Jets. Kelley ain't it, so go ahead and clear out the precious brain space you were using on him. Just get that out of there. Delete that file. Next was LaMichael Pirine, at the 306. Not a lot of work in 10 games, not a lot of production on that work, and they brought in Tevin Coleman with the 49ers coaches. They bring him over from San Francisco, and they drafted Michael Carter in the draft this year. I think the Jets are kind of telling us what to expect from Pirine this year, which is not much. And that Pirine name not holding up very well in the NFL so far. You know, Samaje and LaMichael not really lighting it up. And the last running back that was taken in our draft was at the 307, and that was Anthony McFarland of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Same sort of story, just not used a lot. And with the entrance of Najee Harris, that's not going to change at all. Likely he's the number 3 back on the Steelers behind Benny Snell as well as Najee Harris, and you have a guy who will go undrafted in all but the deepest of deep leagues. The quick recap here, the people at the top mostly stayed at the top, though the order got kind of shuffled around a bit, and Antonio Gibson kind of smashed his way into that club. This class kind of smashes the 2021 class, as I think outside of Najee Harris, there are 5 or 6 2020 running backs before you get to the second 2021 back. Like, if you keep Clyde in, if you have Clyde above Travis Etienne, that's totally fine. So Clyde, Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, Cam Akers, DeAndre Swift, maybe even Antonio Gibson. So there's 6. And then maybe Travis Etienne. So this running back class in 2021 is it's just not as good. It's just not as good. Like I said, next time we'll look at the wide receivers. That'll be on Tuesday's show, and then we will wrap up with the quarterback and tight end 2020 rookie show looking back and projecting forward. Now, for the shameless self-promotion, check out the website, thefantasytheory.com. Follow me on Instagram at thefantasytheory and Twitter at fantasytheory1. The Fantasy Theory is 16 characters. They only give you 15 characters. You hate to see it. And by the way, a lot of the fun graphics that you see on Instagram, if you do follow me, were created by Janelle. She is the nicest lady. I love her very much, and she does an excellent job with those for me. So thank you. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Google Podcast. If you wouldn't mind leaving me a review, I'm never going to stop saying it. The reviews are so helpful to me, both in getting the podcast more eyes and getting me your feedback. So the more that I can hear about what we're doing that's good, what we're doing that's bad, things that you like, things that you don't like, your questions, your comments, your concerns, that type of thing. All of that information is super relevant to me right now as we're building, as we're growing. And again, that 5-star review or whatever you think the show is worth, it certainly gets more eyes on the podcast, which kind of keeps that snowball rolling, gets that going. So if you do have the time, I certainly would appreciate it. That is going to do it for this week. So thank you very much for listening. We'll see you next time. Have a good one.